Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2025 release Getaway. It's a Shudder exclusive and it's coming to Shudder on Friday, January 10th, so this is a no spoiler review. So this is one that's directed by Steffen Haars, who has worked previously with Nick Frost, who stars in this film and was involved in writing this film. Actually, it's just Nick Frost who wrote the script for this film, and you can see where he pulls some inspiration from stuff he's worked on in the past, and you'll see what I mean if you've already seen the film, or if you go and see the film, you understand what I'm talking about. But apparently he worked with Steffen Haars, the director, on the film Crazy House in 2024, and I did not see that film, but I heard from a lot of people that it was not a great time, and it was really kind of like weird, over the top, like this horror comedy mix. Having seen this is also horror comedy. I thought this was pretty solid. So it doesn't necessarily make me want to go see Crazy House, but if you have seen it and you're watching this video, please comment, is that a film I should be seeing, or should I skip on that one? Also, while I'm talking about that stuff, you can do spoilers in the comments if you want to. We can talk about this film. Always like hearing differing opinions on films, whether you loved it, hated it, or you were in between. Do me a favor, subscribe to the channel to support me. Thumbs up on the video always helps. Hitting the, why am I blanking on it? It's one of those days. Hitting the notification bell button will let you know when I'm putting up new videos. And also, if you want to pitch in a little bit monetarily, there is a link in the description for memberships, and see what perks you get with the channel for a nominal fee each month. And there are 2 tiers to that. Anyway, to the actual review. Again, directed by Steffen Haars, written by Nick Frost, and Shudder exclusive, coming Friday, January 10th. So the story behind this one is about a getaway. It's a family that's going on a getaway to the island of Svalta, which is a Swedish island that has this pretty messed up past to it, which they lay out in the very beginning of the film. So I like that aspect of it. Creates this kind of eerie, creepy feeling, and there's this kind of like gnarled, messed up past to the place that these characters are going. So it gives this kind of feeling or foreboding while you're getting into it. So there's a lot of kind of foreboding going into them getting to the island. Too heavy in my opinion, but it's then about like what happens when they're there. Is this a situation where everything's fine on the island with the inhabitants, or is there something terrible going on? And you can kind of figure out what's happening. It's a horror film. So I will say this is a film that doesn't have too many surprises, but there is a surprise in there that I actually did end up liking. But as far as synopsis goes, that's where I'm going to cut it off. I think this was solid enough, and that'll be reflected in my star rating at the end. The first scene of this film is very odd in a good and creepy way. First of all, this is shot well. I do think it looks good cinematography with the film. It's not anything amazing. There aren't like really interesting camera angles, super engaging cinematography, but it's solid. It looks good. But that first scene, very interesting, does kind of grab your attention and kind of make you wonder what is going on here. Where are we going to take this thing? And it doesn't really take too long before you understand what that first sequence was about, which is typically not what films do with opening sequences like that. They usually let that go a lot longer, a lot of the times until the very end of the film. But with this one, you probably figure it out within like the first 10 to 15 minutes, honestly, which I think is just kind of a weird choice, but I like the scene. So it added great creepiness to kind of set the stage. And then the comedy starts relatively quickly after that with some dialogue. Very early on, this film feels heavily inspired by a great and very revered 70s film. I'm not going to give you too many hints on that, because it's a film that if I talk about it too much or I describe it too much, people are going to be like, oh, I know exactly what that is. And it's going to give too much away about the film. If you've already seen the film and you're watching this review, you know what film I'm talking about, most likely. You should, because if you haven't seen that film, you definitely need to see that film. And if you haven't seen it and you don't know what I'm talking about, ask me in the description what film I'm talking about. And I can give that to you, and then you can go watch it, and you can thank me for that. The dialoguing... One of those days again. The dialogue and acting is very good. In the sense of it's fun. It plays into the comedy aspect of the script very heavily, And I like that about the film. It lets you know very early on this is a horror comedy because, you know, they go too hard with the foreboding and you're just like, okay, I get it. Horror, 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 too much horror. But then they kind of kick in with this dialogue and you're like, okay, very comedy driven. There's going to be tons of comedic dialogue. And for the most part, I like the comedic dialogue in this film. I think it works quite well. I think the characters are interesting enough and the way they interact. I think the actors themselves did a really nice job with the relationships between everyone, and just kind of like the banter of how the dialogue is written was pretty fun for the most part. There are some lines where you're just kind of like, ooh, like very cringy at times, but for the most part I did enjoy it. So relatively successful horror comedy in my opinion, which that mixture is really hard to put together effectively. I think it's effective enough in my opinion to be worth a watch. They go very heavy on the foreboding in the beginning, but it works for comedic reasons initially because you're kind of like, oh, okay, I see. This is part of the comedy aspect of it, is to just like blare this super foreboding music at you and make characters say super foreboding things. And then you're just like, oh, we're being ridiculous. We're being very over the top. And that's kind of a part of the comedy of this. But then it does get kind of annoying kind of fast because it doesn't stop. They keep with it. It's one thing if you do it for a little stint just to like give people an idea of like the comedic aspect of it that you're going for, or like the joke of it. But when it just keeps going and going and going, especially with how over the top the score is, it's terrible. Like the composition of the score is just too much. How they blare it at you all the time is too much. It gets severely annoying. It's one of my biggest issues with the film is the score is way too much and it's not good. So weird choice there. Wish they would have done something a little different. Maybe make it a little bit more subtle. Or like I said, you know, hit it hard in the beginning and let people know, oh, we're making fun of this. This is a horror comedy. And then just kind of taper it off and let people just experience the rest of the film without being annoyed. The main character interactions with the locals also start to feel very repetitive very early on. That's another issue where it feels like the writing is a little bit stuck in what they were trying to do with main character versus main character interactions with the locals, and it just starts to feel like they just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. It's the same interaction over and over and over with just different characters, and it's like stock, kind of these stock characters, and you're just like, okay, like I get the point. They probably could have shaved a lot of that out of the film. And it's not a long film. Like the pacing isn't bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's like an hour. I think it's like an hour and 26 minutes with credits. So it's not a super long movie, thankfully. It feels a little bit longer than it should at an hour and 26 minutes. But yeah, that repetitive aspect becomes an issue. There is a pretty big shift in the film that took me a bit to figure out if I actually liked it or not. Because I wouldn't say I was like fully caught off guard by the shift in the film, but it took me a minute to adjust, and I was like, do I like this shift in this? Do I not like this shift in this? And ultimately I landed on, yeah, actually I think I do like the shift in this, because if they didn't do that, I think the film was going to play out too boring, especially going into the ending. Too predictable, too boring, but with that shift, they made it something totally different for me, and I was just like, oh, okay, like now I'm having a lot more fun. Now it's a lot more interesting to me. So ultimately, I did like that, although I was a little confused for a minute on how I was feeling. There is some okay gore in this film. Don't expect a ton of gore. There is some gore, though. You get a little bit of a payoff, and it's nothing like grandiose. It's not like awesome practical effects or copious amounts of blood or anything like that, but some gore in there. And the ending is okay. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending. I thought it was serviceable. That's kind of the best way I would put it. It's a serviceable ending. I will say that this film has a lot of a hot fuzz feel to it in certain ways. And that makes a whole lot of sense because Nick Frost being the writer of this, and he's acting in it. So yeah, it has kind of a bit of like a hot fuzz feel to it, which if you like that, then maybe you'll like this film. If you don't like that, then maybe you won't like this film. Just saying. But anyway, like I said, if you want to talk about it, we can put it down in the comments. I'm giving this a decent enough 3 out of 5 star rating. I thought about going 2.5, but then I was like, you know what? that shift at the end and how they had things play out at the end got pretty fun for me. And I did like some of the comedic stuff. So overall, I think I liked it a little bit more than I didn't like it. So 3-star rating on this one. Let me know your ratings on this or how you felt about the film overall in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. And thank you for your time. Until next time, keep it brutal.